Hey everyone, what's going on? So I previously made this video about the Donald Trump assassination attempt and how it was related to the stock market crash symbolism. But this Donald Trump assassination attempt is also super related to Aleister Crowley, this famous magician, right, who started the religion of Thelema, and it has a lot to do with numbers and gematria, things that I talk about on this channel. And I I'm making this video now because tomorrow, August 31st, is a really big day that I've been paying attention to with the Aleister Crowley symbolism, because that will be my son's 5th birthday, and my son just so happens to be named Aleister. And the reason that we came up with this name was I had been blogging about Aleister Crowley in 2019, and I was pointing out how it was going to be the 72nd anniversary of Aleister Crowley dying at the age of 72. And of course, there's 72 demons in the Goetia. Also, the demon who told him the book of the law just so happened to be Awas, or possibly Iwas. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, but this is the typical spelling. And notice Iwas equals 72. But anyway, I didn't intentionally name him Aleister due to Aleister Crowley. I had made 2 blog posts in the month of July about Aleister Crowley and this number 72. And just after that, my girlfriend came home one day and said, I think we should name our new son Aleister, right? And I was like, that's crazy, because she doesn't ever read my blog. She wants nothing to do with this knowledge. You know, she thinks it's ridiculous, whatever. And I was just like, you know what? Due to this synchronicity, I thought in my head, let's just name him Aleister. You know what I mean? Let's do it, Let's name him Aleister. I'm going to follow the synchronicity. We'll see what happens. And he ended up being born on August 31st of 2019. And this stuck out to me because August 31st, 2019 just so happened to be a span of 72 days before my birthday. And it also just so happened to be a span of 93 days before the death day of Aleister Crowley that I was following in connection to the number 72. And recall, the number 93 is another big number important to Aleister Crowley. Thelema equals 93. His religion, Awas apparently even equals 93, right? This is the cover of one of the covers of the Book of the Law, and it has the Roman numeral 93 equals 418 here. So it's an important number that my son would be born 93 days before that day and 72 days before my birthday. And there's a whole lot more that goes on with this that I will explain as we move on, such as my previous son, my only other son, my only 2 biological kids, their birthdays are separated by 4 months and 18 days, like 418. And when my other son was born, his name is Zamian Barrett, just so happens to equal 72 frontwards and backwards in the reduction method. And the day that he was born, my friend Cody Green was the only person to call me while in the hospital. Well, his full name equals 72. He's the only one of my friends to call me when my first son was born. And right after I got done talking to him, I was talking about numbers and whatever else, and I went in and I sat down and I looked up at the TV, and Family Guy was on, and it was an episode where some girl was having a baby, and they were like, it's a boy. And I was like, what are the odds of that? And I went and looked it up, and it just so happened to be the 72nd episode of Family Guy. Let me see if I can find it here. It was this episode right here. I hadn't watched TV the whole time. I talked to my friend Cody. After my son was born, I go sit down, I look at the TV. This is the clip that is on there. Some girl having a baby on Family Guy. And it just so happened to be the 72nd episode of Family Guy. And I had went home or whatever, came back the next day, and the only thing that I watched on TV was an episode of Futurama that day, and that turned out to be season 7, episode 2. And I was like, 72, my son's name equals 72. I'm having synchronicity with the 72 stuff. in that episode, right after she has a baby, it goes over to Tony Danza and Sylvester Stallone, which is also interesting, to August 31st, because August 31st is the day that Apollo Creed dies. And remember that earlier in the year, Carl Weathers, the actor who plays Apollo Creed, had died. And Rocky equals 72, and there's 72 Rocky steps, and a whole bunch more. I was talking about Carl Weathers clear back when Bob Barker died, something that I pointed out a few days before on my blog. I pointed out how I thought Bob Barker would possibly die, and then he dies like a week later. But it's all related back to the movie Happy Gilmore, right? So Carl Weathers was also Chubbs in Happy Gilmore. He was Apollo Creed. Rocky Marciano, right? He died on August 31st as well. So there's this big important thing to August 31st. That's why I'm making this video. We'll see what happens. Maybe it's just a personal synchronicity, something that's important to why I'm following this narrative. But, there's all kinds of stuff. Even the guy who yells jackass in Happy Gilmore, he died in like April this year, right? 3 people within a year in the movie Happy Gilmore have died. And years ago I was blogging about that, a connection to earthquakes in the East Coast. And we had an East Coast earthquake earlier this year right next to the Donald Trump golf course, right? Think about that with Happy Gilmore. But I believe August 31st was the date of the 1886 Charleston East Coast earthquake. And it happened like exactly 99 years before Apollo Creed died on August 31st. And then that's why Bob Barker died at the age of 99, and Adam Sandler born on 9/9, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But, the point that I'm making is the fact that both of my kids were seemingly born important to this narrative with Aleister Crowley, right? And I just want to point out, before I move on, that my son's birthdays are 4 months and 18 days apart, once again. Synced up to the Book of the Law, 93, 418, and so on. Another thing that's really interesting and how I know it's connected to this narrative is if you go back and look at the blog posts of how I came up with my son Aleister's name, the blog post that I'm referring to is these 2 posts that I made on July 13th, 2019, right? July 13th, 2019. Obviously, I talked about Aleister Crowley. That very same day, I also talked about this other one that had to do with aliens and Lil Wayne. And, think about aliens, and Aleister Crowley supposedly conjured up a demon named Lamb that looked like a gray alien. So at the end of this post, I even talked about, Aleister Crowley, or I wrote AWAS, but it's supposed to be Lamb, I believe, that looks like the gray alien. But regardless, the point that I'm making is these 2 blog posts that are the reason that I had a synchronicity with Aleister Crowley and ended up naming my son Aleister were from July 13th. And that just so happens to be the same day in history that the Donald Trump assassination attempt happened, right? So it's like, what are the odds of that? That's how I know it's related. And I mean, look at the other blog posts right before it. I'm talking about the stock market, right? And this was from 2019, so once again, this is how I know this narrative is important. But before I move on, I'm going to go back and explain some of these things that I was talking about in the previous video, because a lot of it had to do with the number 316. But if you just stay with me, towards the end of it, you're going to start seeing how Aleister Crowley is also linked up to the same symbolism and also connected to the number 316. So what I've previously pointed out with this stock market crash symbolism is that the Trump assassination attempt was 3 months and 16 days before the anniversary of the stock market crash. And, 3 months, 16 days, a lot like 316. This is a big number that I have talked about with Donald Trump in relation to the stock market. If you write out Donald Trump, his name with the capital letter ciphers equals 316. Of course, the capital letter ciphers are synced with the Donald Trump, because of the capital insurrection, right? They were telling us to pay attention to capital letters. So it's 3 months, 16 days before the anniversary of the stock market crash. Donald Trump just so happens to equal 316. The president during the stock market crash was Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover in these ciphers also equals 316. If you look up Herbert Hoover just so happened to die on October 20th, 1964. And if you look up Kamala Harris, that just so happens to be the exact day that she was born. So Donald Trump's going to be running against Kamala Harris for president, and her birthday is the exact day that Herbert Hoover, the president during the stock market crash, had died, right? Donald Trump would then go on to pick J.D. Vance as his vice president candidate. And look at J.D. Vance's birthday, August 2nd. If you go from August 2nd to Donald Trump's birthday, it just so happens to be 316 days. So he picked J.D. Vance, whose birthday is 316 days before Donald Trump's birthday, along with all these other 316s. And then on July 21st, of all days, July 21st, Joe Biden would announce that he's dropping out of the race for the election. And that just so happened to be a span of 3 months and 16 days before the election. So Joe Biden ends up dropping out 3 months, 16 days before the election. Once again, a lot like the number 316. And I'm not going to go into full detail here with this previous video, but you can come watch it. I recommend watching this video. If you haven't seen this video, it'll make a lot more sense. But a big thing I talked about in this video was how when Donald Trump and Joe Biden both met Pope Francis as the president, it was all linked up to Squid Game, this big money theme, and, also to the stock market, right? And, for example, the big number in Squid Game is 456, and Donald Trump and Joe Biden met Pope Francis as president exactly 4 years, 5 months, and 6 days apart, a lot like 456. But Joe Biden met Pope Francis on the anniversary of the stock market crash. And on that same day, we had a story about the Iowa governor, Kim Reynolds, doing something with COVID-19, right? And Iowa is important because Herbert Hoover is the only president who has the links to Iowa, right? Herbert Hoover, the Iowa president, Herbert Hoover, the president during the stock market crash. And to make it even more interesting is that Kim Reynolds, the Iowa governor, became the Iowa governor the same day that Donald Trump met Pope Francis. So, I mean, just think about it. What were the odds that Joe Biden would then go on to meet Pope Francis on the anniversary of the stock market crash? And the same day we have a headline story about the Iowa governor, Kim Reynolds, being in the news with something to do with COVID-19 and so on. You knew that this narrative was linked up to exactly what I'm talking about. And this is important because if you go from Pope Francis's birthday to the anniversary of the stock market crash, I bet you can't guess how many days it was, right? How many days is it? 316 days, right? So Pope Francis's birthday, 316 days before the stock market crash anniversary. In the previous video, I also mentioned how this is all linked up to Super Bowl 52, right? And that was important because Super Bowl 52 was played at U.S. Bank Stadium, right? Think about it. U.S. Bank Stadium. It was during the 88th anniversary of the stock market crash. The big thing in that was kneeling during the national anthem, right? The word kneel equals 88. Colin Kaepernick equals 88. Trump equals 88. All kinds of 88. Herbert Hoover, H. H is the 8th letter, a lot like an 88. So you knew it was linked up to the stock market, right? And think about it, U.S. Bank Stadium. It had to do with the kneeling during the national anthem. Well, that's interesting because Herbert Hoover is also the president who made the Star-Spangled Banner the official national anthem. He's the one who signed that as the official national anthem into Congress. So once again, it goes back to that same narrative. And if you go from the date of Super Bowl 52 to Pope Francis's birthday, it just so happens to be 316 days. Let's point it out here real quick. So Pope Francis's birthday was even 316 days after Super Bowl 52 that was all linked up to the stock market. And, if you go back and watch some of these other videos too, I was talking about the Francis Scott Key Bridge, or Francis Scott Key, and how he was related to all of that, and how all of this seemingly went back to Super Bowl 52 is really important. And think about collapse and bridge and just, just in general. Water is important to money. So definitely something going on there. But Super Bowl 52, if you remember, was also really important to my sister, my Uncle Clancy, who died right after the Super Bowl, and my grandma, who died right before the Super Bowl. Because the year before, my uncle had died in a mysterious car crash. The very same day, I got an express ship letter in the mail basically telling me to just believe in God and quit doing videos and whatnot. And I mean, it was express shipped, and I got it the exact same day that he died at the hospital. It's so weird. And his car wreck makes no sense. None of it makes any sense, But this is right after all of the umbrella stuff that was going on with Zach, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because my video always gets deleted when I bring it up, but it was right before the Patriots had beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl, and my uncle died, and I pointed out even back then how there was this connection to the date and the number 1012, right? Well, let's put it down here, easier, but the number 1012, right? That's the day Columbus discovered America, supposedly, and my uncle was a 4th-degree Knight of Columbus. But I also pointed out how this was Aleister Crowley's birthday, and my uncle died 190 days before his birthday. And if you write out Aleister Crowley, I spelled it wrong there, but if you write out Aleister Crowley, it equals 190. So my uncle dies 190 days before his birthday. Aleister Crowley equals 190. It had a lot to do with this number 1012, which was Aleister Crowley's birthday. But just after my uncle died, and then the Falcons lost in the Super Bowl, I was at my grandma Murphy's house, and the only other people that were there were my sister and my Uncle Clancy. And that was the day that I found out my Uncle Barney didn't die from cancer. He died from like a brain bleed from his car wreck or whatever. I think he had a truck, but I always say car, but automobile accident. So he died from the injuries from that. And I always thought he died from his cancer maybe, which was weird. But thought maybe he might have had a stroke or something of the sort that, maybe is why he went off the road in the wrong direction or something of the sort, but it wasn't. It was just because he wrecked. But the point is that just after that, I was at my grandma's, and my grandma lived on Eagle Street, and that same day, I found out that my sister lived on Falcon Avenue. I never knew what her actual address was. And I was like, that's crazy. You live on Falcon Avenue right after the Falcons losing the Super Bowl. Then we're talking about Barney, who was linked up to the Falcons because where he wrecked was right next to where the high school team, the Falcons, play. And I later learned that my sister owned a company called Eagle Acres. And I was like, so I learned this at my grandma's house on Eagle Street. My sister owns a company called Eagle Acres. And I started thinking about my Uncle Clancy. My Uncle Clancy's son, Ryan, was the only Philadelphia Eagles fan that I've ever met in my entire life up until that point. So I was like, there's something going on with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? That was a big factor into why I was following the Philadelphia Eagles in regards to Super Bowl 52. But then my grandma would go on to die on September 24th when the season began that year. And then the day of the Super Bowl, my sister's town, Audubon, Iowa, was featured in a Super Bowl commercial. I was like, what are the odds of that? The town that my sister lives in is featured in a Super Bowl commercial, and the town is named after like James or John Audubon, and he's a guy who's famous for writing a book called The Birds of America. The bird of America is the eagle. And just after the Super Bowl, a young girl from the town my sister lives in ended up drowning in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And the last person to drown in that same spot was a guy named Lyle Eagletail. But then my Uncle Clancy, he went on to die on April 17th that year, the same day that Barbara Bush died. And a lot of people in the conspiracy movement believe that Barbara Bush is actually Aleister Crowley's daughter, which makes it even more interesting. But my Uncle Clancy, I mean, if you look at his name in these capital letter ciphers here, Clancy Murphy, just so happens to equal 316. even if you add his middle name in there, it equals 316. And his son, the only Eagles fan that I knew, his name also equals 316. And he's the first son of Clancy, and his birthday is 7/7, and Clancy's birthday is 3/22, which means that he was born 3 months and 16 days after Clancy's birthday, 3/16. And to even go even further with this, my grandma, who also died, I always called her Grandma Murphy. Grandma Murphy equals 316. So it's like, what are the odds of all this? And, my Grandma Murphy died on 9/24, which is a special day this year that hopefully I'll talk about later in regards to the umbrella symbolism. But in relation to money, remember how my wages got garnished at the end of 2022, and it stopped being garnished on 3/22/23. So it stopped being garnished on my Uncle Clancy's birthday. And because I was getting my wages garnished, my paychecks were all $666 for like 3 months. 666, And once again, think about 666 in relation to money and Solomon. There is a huge money theme that is going on with how all of this stuff is interrelated into Aleister Crowley, who referred to himself as the Great Beast 666. But, moving on, another reason why this same Super Bowl 52 connection got so interesting is that Kamala Harris then had to choose her vice president candidate, right? And it came down to Josh Shapiro or Tim Walz, right? And think about Walls and Wall Street and Donald Trump and the wall. I mean, give me a break. There's obvious symbolism there, right? I didn't realize that at the time when I made this blog post that she was going to be announcing it in Philadelphia, and Tim Walz was the governor of Minnesota, which I'll explain here in a second. But notice, the reason why I thought it was going to be Josh Shapiro was because his name equals 316. I'm like, what are the odds? It comes down to a guy whose names equals 316 of all numbers, And it ended up being Tim Walz, right? But she announced it in Philadelphia. Remember, Philadelphia won Super Bowl 52 at US Bank Stadium in Minnesota. And then she goes on to pick Tim, right? And it's related to football even because the media gave us this story here. Walz makes his debut as Harris vice president pick in new TikTok video. And the TikTok video has a clip of him with the Minnesota Vikings. So once again, that it is connected to Super Bowl 52. And she made this pick 185 days after the date of Super Bowl 52. Well, in Gematria, stock market crash equals 185, right? Just like Donald John Trump 185. White House even equals 185 in the capital letter ciphers. The word president also equals 185 in the composite ciphers that I'm going to talk about here in a minute and why they're important. Because I know it's important due to the Aleister Crowley connection. And I'll also mention some stuff about Tim Walz as we move on in relation to Aleister Crowley as well, because it's also linked up to the number 418, but I'm trying to stick on this 316 for the time being. But notice that Super Bowl 52 was also a span of 3 months and 16 days after Kamala Harris's birthday. Another 316, right? Just another number connected to the stock market, synced up to Super Bowl 52. And before it was US Bank Stadium even. US Bank Stadium. Just want to point it out really quick. It was Hubert Humphrey Metrodome, right? Named after the former vice president, right? Hubert Humphrey. Just think about that. It's named in honor of a vice president. But if you write that guy's name out in the composite ciphers, it just so happens, I'm going to pull him up really quick, but Hubert Humphrey. Look at his name. I can't even spell here. But his name in the composite ciphers equals 316. And I mean, there's just a whole slew of 316 that is going on. Like, Melania Trump's birthday is 316 days after Donald Trump's birthday, right? Another big thing we've talked about with Donald Trump is the number 218, right? Let's put it in here real quick, just for visual reference. The number 218, this big number that we've talked about with Donald Trump. If you write out Trump in all capital letters, it equals 218. If you write out Donald in all capital letters, it equals 218. If you write out Ivana, it equals 218. Remember, Ivana died 2 months and 18 days after Melania's birthday. When Donald Trump was president, there was the presidential alert at 218. There was also that Donald Trump tombstone that was in Central Park that was 2 months and 18 days before Donald Trump's birthday, right? 218, this big number with Donald Trump that we've pointed out for years. But if you look up the date, 218, February 18th, it just so happens to be the day that leaves 316 days in the year. Also, the Capitol insurrection, it just so happened to be 2 months and 18 days after Kamala Harris's birthday. And in relation to Melania Trump, too, if you write out Melania in all capital letters, her name equals 316, right? So there is an interesting relationship to how this all coincides. And, once again, I'm talking about synchronicity things all of the time and how I learn a lot of these things because of synchronicities, and that's how I know that I'm on the right track and so on. But when I first started blogging about the stock market connections, right, all these things to the Donald Trump assassination and so on, the very next day I went to work, right, and right here it is. So I went to work the very next day after I blogged about all these 316s, and the first thing I had to do was go outside to our garage, or it used to be a trailer, now it's like a garage. And I can't remember what I had to do. I had to go outside and maybe grab like a road cone or something. But I walked outside and I went to the garage, and as I was coming back out, there was a truck in the parking lot that said stock market right on the side. And I was like, what are the odds of that, stock market? And believe it or not, the company is Sullivan Supply, the local company here, but look at Sullivan Supply. 316. So what are the odds that it say stock market on this big Sullivan Supply truck the very next day after I'm blogging about the stock market and the number 316, I mean, you just can't even make this type of stuff up. That's how I know what I'm talking about is on the right track, because I'm having synchronicity showing me these things. Another thing I pointed out in my previous video was how this Donald Trump assassination attempt was linked up to the Marilyn Manson video from 2017 for his song called Say 10. And he depicted Donald Trump getting his head blown off in this music video, or the original music video that he had. So it was linked up to a Donald Trump assassination attempt. And there's a whole bunch of other things that went along with this. He has a video called Coma White with Rose McGowan, where they reenact the JFK assassination. And right around the same time of him releasing this video, Rose McGowan was in the news for going against Harvey Weinstein and his sexual assault allegations. And there was stuff about the JFK files in the news. There was all kinds of stuff. You have to watch the previous video. I just don't want to go too far off topic, but the point is, look, he has this thing with the Donald Trump getting his head blown off, and it's linked up to a possible assassination attempt. And if you write out Marilyn Manson's real name, Brian Hugh Warner, it equals 316. And I mean, keep in mind, in relation to Super Bowl 52, this video came out in 2017 during the NFL season, right? Which is the same year as Super Bowl 52. There's a whole bunch of things that go back to Super Bowl 52. Even Charles Manson even died that year, after I had been blogging about the kneeling linked up to his helter-skelter theory about black people rising up. And Charles Manson died on November 19th, right? And that is also the same day in history that Kamala became the acting president while Joe Biden was having surgery. So, there's just a lot of interesting pieces to the narrative here. But what are the odds that Marilyn Manson then, in August here, Marilyn Manson decides to release a brand new video and a brand new song First time in 4 years that he releases a new song, right? Like, what are the odds of this? Further, what are the odds that he decides to release this on August 2nd, which is J.D. Vance's birthday, which is 316 days before Donald Trump's birthday? Even in this blog post, I'm even talking about Sid from Slipknot, right? And how it's related to Ozzy Osbourne having a song Mr. Crowley and this big old hell theme that I've been talking about, but just want to point it out. No, I talked about Sid from Slipknot in here somewhere. Yeah, because Ozzy ate the bat in Des Moines, Iowa. Iowa, the stock market, Slipknot from Iowa, but Ozzy ate the bat on Sid Wilson's birthday of Slipknot, and now Sid is with Kelly Osbourne and a bunch of stuff. And then, of course, Sid Wilson ends up getting burnt in a bonfire accident on August 23rd, which just happens to be 316 days after Aleister Crowley's birthday. There's just, a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with this. But Marilyn Manson also released another music video. Let me see if I can find this here. Where did I put it? But Marilyn Manson also released another music video on August 16th. And what I noticed about this music video was that there's a girl playing in the background, right? And I looked it up, and Marilyn Manson now has a female band member. And it's the first ever female band member in Marilyn Manson over all these years. The first time ever that a female is in there. And her name just so happens to be Reba Myers. And of course, if you write out Reba Myers, Reba Myers, 316. It's like you can't even make this stuff up. And think about that. The first female person, and then think about Kamala, who could potentially be the first female president. There's a lot of interesting things that are going on here. Of course, Marilyn Manson, he got his name from combining Marilyn Monroe and Charles Manson. And Marilyn Monroe had the supposed affair with JFK, so she has some connections to JFK, right? Presidential assassination. Charles Manson is interesting because Charles Manson just so happened to be born on the 316th day of the year, November 12th. Charles Manson. He was born on the 316th day of the year. His real name is Charles Mills Maddox. If you write that out, something I pointed out years ago, his name equals 316. So his real name equals 316. He's born on the 316th day of the year. Marilyn Manson's real name equals 316. He just adds a female band member with the name of 316. He comes out with a music video 316 days before Donald Trump's birthday. It's all linked up to Say 10, where he has an assassination video of Donald Trump. And like I said before, Charles Manson is linked up to this kneeling during the national anthem symbolism with Super Bowl 52 because of his helter-skelter theory about black people rising up. Something that everybody thought was just absolutely crazy back in 2017 when I was talking about it, and then Charles Manson ended up dying. But this is why we got a story about Mariah Carey's mother and sister dying recently, right? On the same day. It's because if you go back to the narrative that I'm talking about with Charles Manson, it was in 2016, just before the Falcons and the Patriots played in the Super Bowl. On New Year's Eve, there was a story about how Mariah Carey was drunk and she lip sang. And the story also went on to compare it to Janet Jackson's boob getting thrown out by Justin Timberlake. But like 2 or 3 days after that story, they had a story about Janet Jackson in the news. And it was something to do with her having a baby or something. But right next to that story, there was a story about Charles Manson. So then I started thinking about how the Falcons were in the Super Bowl. And the Falcons logo used to be a black bird. And the song Black Bird is a song where Charles Manson says that it's telling black people to rise up. And remember, 2016 was the year that Colin Kaepernick had first taken a knee. And then it got really big the following season with Super Bowl 52. But in October, right as the song Say 10 was released, they announced that Justin Timberlake was going to be doing the halftime show of the Super Bowl. So I knew there was a connection to Charles Manson and the helter-skelter theory all linked up back to the same narrative. And once again, it all started with the story about Mariah Carey, and now Mariah Carey's in the news for her sister and mother both dying. And we also had stories of Harvey Weinstein, right, back in July, after I was talking about all this stuff with Marilyn Manson. We had Harvey Weinstein getting COVID, and then they gave him a retrial for his sexual assault or whatever, and they rescheduled it for November 12th, which is Charles Manson's birthday, right? And once again, Rose McGowan, Marilyn Manson's ex-girlfriend, was the girl who was the biggest person going against Harvey Weinstein and so on. And she was also in the Coma White video portraying Jackie Kennedy, right? It was JFK, and then she was Jackie Kennedy in that video. So it's like, all these things that I'm talking about, they keep showing up in the news. But anyway, hopefully you get the gist of what I'm talking about. This number 316, it's seemingly very important. And I know I'm talking too much, but I just want to reiterate, 316, the stock market, there's all of these things that are interrelated, synced up to the Donald Trump assassination attempt. But like I said, the real reason that I'm making this video is because I want to show the connections to Aleister Crowley. And if you go back to February this year, it was February 25th, I believe, if I can find the thing here. February 25th, Zach was doing a live stream, and during this live stream, some guy called in, and he asked him about composite numbers, and if he'd ever looked at the connection to composite numbers, and he was pronouncing it weird, like composite, or I don't know what it was. He was just pronouncing it weird, but he was talking about composite numbers, and this was on February 25th, and basically a composite number is kind of like the opposite of a prime number, and since we've always talked about the connections to prime numbers, this guy was wondering if we've ever looked at the connections to the composite numbers. But if you go, so basically this is the day that we were inspired to look into the composite numbers and composite cipher, right? And then a whole bunch of people did some awesome work, Zenith of the Alpha is the one where I noticed it, that was pointing it out or whatever. But the point that I'm trying to make with this is that day where this guy called in, it was 4 months and 18 days before the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. 4 months, 18 days. And remember, 418 is important to Aleister Crowley and the book of the law that was dictated to him, which is 93 equals 418, which is supposed to be AWAS, right? To him who is the great beast, and this is 666. So 93 equals 418. So I'm just pointing out, 4 months and 18 days before the Donald Trump assassination attempt was when we really started looking at the composite numbers. And if you go from the assassination attempt of Donald Trump to the death day of Aleister Crowley, it just so happens to be 4 months and 18 days. Another interesting thing is that if you go to his next birthday, it just so happens to be a span of 337 days. And this is interesting in relation to the composite numbers, because the 337th composite just so happens to be 418, right? So 337 days before Trump's birthday was this assassination attempt. 337, the 337th composite number is 418, and then that attempt was 4 months and 18 days before the death anniversary of Aleister Crowley. In relation to 337 too, a big thing with Aleister Crowley is the song Mr. Crowley by Ozzy Osbourne, that is in a reference to Aleister Crowley, right? And however you pronounce it, I've read tons of, it seems that it's pronounced Crowley to me, so that's why I'm saying Crowley, but it could be Crowley, but the way Ozzy pronounces it. But notice that the song Mr. Crowley came out 337 days before after Aleister Crowley's birthday, right? 337. Once again, that number connected to 418. And Ozzy Osbourne, he just so happened to be born 418 days after Aleister Crowley's final birthday. So Aleister Crowley's final birthday was 418 days later was the day that Ozzy Osbourne was born. So once again, there's a relationship here to 337 and 418. And remember last year when the character from Supernatural, he plays the character Crowley. He had a heart attack on the death anniversary of Aleister Crowley on December 1st. So, I mean, once again, there's a whole bunch of stuff with Ozzy Osbourne and how it's all linked up. There's, even in the Satanic Cipher, Des Moines equals 418. That's where Ozzy Osbourne ate the bat, right? In the Satanic Cipher. And that's where, Slipknot is from. And Slipknot has that song called H377, right? And that is a reference to hell, right? But anyway, the reason that I know the composite ciphers are important, once again, is because we learned about them 4 months and 18 days before the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. And if you write out Aleister Crowley, it just so happens to equal 316 in this composite cipher. So he equals 316, this big number with the stock market stuff that I'm talking about. And Aleister Crowley also, he died 316 days before his birthday. So his name in the composite ciphers equals 316, and he died 316 days before his birthday. And then we learned about the composite ciphers 4 months and 18 days before the Trump assassination. That was 4 months and 18 days before the death day of Aleister Crowley. All synced up to the numbers of Aleister Crowley here. Even look at Joe Biden's full name. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. His name's 418 in the composite ciphers. 418. What are the odds of that, And then on August 5th, we got the stories of the market meltdown, right? Just like how we had the story of the market meltdown. Markets are melting down. And remember in the day after Super Bowl 52, the big story was market meltdown. Market meltdown, right? The day after Super Bowl 52, we got this story. So it's like, what are the odds we're getting a market meltdown after I'm talking about all these stuff with the stock market crash and how it's linked up and so on? But the story just so happened to come 418 days after Donald Trump's birthday, 418. Once again, these two numbers are interrelated somehow. And even to take it a step further, this year, August 5th was the 218th day of the year. Once again, that other number that's synced up to Donald Trump, right? 218 is the day that leaves 316 days in the year. Trump equals 218. Donald equals 218. Ivana 218. Ivana died 2 months and 18 days after Melania's birthday. There's the presidential alert at 218. Remember, last year there was also the FEMA alert at 218. And on that same day, Russia also had an emergency alert. And I'm bringing that back up because Russia invaded Ukraine 4 months and 18 days after Vladimir Putin's birthday, 418. And this market meltdown story that happened on August 5th, it really sticks out because in 2022, grave moment maybe, this was the headline story on August 5th. August 5th, a grave moment for Trump. And I was talking about how it was linked up to the tombstone they found in Central Park with Donald Trump's name on it, right? And that tombstone was 2 months and 18 days before Donald Trump's birthday. But in 2022, we had a grave moment for Trump story. And the very next day, here's that tombstone of Trump. But the very next day, somebody put a statue of Vladimir Putin in Central Park in a sandbox, right? So I was like, interesting how it's related to this story. And then they have the same day we have the FEMA alert last year, Russia also has an emergency alert. Putin invaded Ukraine 4 months and 18 days after his birthday. And recall that the president of Ukraine, he compared the invasion to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor on the date 3/16 of 2022, and his birthday just so happens to be 316 days before Pearl Harbor Day, and Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin on Pearl Harbor Day just before the invasion. And then on that same trip where Donald Trump met Pope Francis, he also touched the Western Wall, and that is connected to the Jewish rabbi saying that Donald Trump is the savior of Ukraine. See my previous video. The date with Donald Trump meeting Pope Francis is also very important because if you go from that date, he met Pope Francis 4 months and 18 days before Aleister Crowley's birthday. Of all days, right? 4 months and 18 days. Even the Capitol insurrection, that was also, what is it, 1/6/2021? That was also 4 months and 18 days before the date that Donald Trump met Pope Francis, right? May 24th. And this gets even deeper because that's the same day that Paul Gray, the first member of Slipknot, died. And he was the pig, and pig relates to money. The year that my son Aleister was born, I was following this big narrative. He was born in a Chinese pig year. That's why Squid Game was so important, because it had the giant piggy bank. That's why the Francis Bacon / capital letter ciphers were important. There's bacon and money. There was all these things that were related to it, right? But May 24th is also, this year they released that South Park obesity special, and they were making fun of Ozempic. And in relation to Slipknot, Sharon Osbourne had collapsed when I was having synchronicity with her a few years back, and it was ended up being because she was on Ozempic and she passed out or something of the sort. So what are the odds South Park would release a episode about Ozempic on May 24th? Remember in 2019, South Park also got banned in China, and then the next episode was called Shots, and it was where Cartman would turn into a pig every time the doctor tried to give him his vaccine, right? So they got banned in China. Then Cartman turned into a pig during the Chinese pig year, where he's trying to, every time they tried to give him his vaccine, and then all of a sudden they had coronavirus and everything else with the vaccines, and they blamed it on China. And they said it came from bats at one point. You know, think about Ozzy Osbourne and the bat. Another thing in relation to this date, May 21st, the Donald Trump assassination attempt, 7/13/2024 here. If you go to that date next year, it's a span of 316 days. 316, right? The big number I'm talking about with this stock market narrative. And remember, next year is the Chinese snake year, and 9/11 happened during a Chinese snake year. Pearl Harbor happened during a Chinese snake year. And also the stock market crash of 1929 happened during a Chinese snake year. So I really think next year is a year to watch out for with the money, stock market symbolism, you know. Even more interesting, too, is the next person to become the president. They're going to become the president a span of 316 days before the death day of Aleister Crowley. And at the beginning of the video, I talked about the date August 31st a whole lot. And August 31st just so happens to be 316 days, oh crap, after Kamala Harris's birthday. So tomorrow will be 316 days after Kamala Harris's birthday. It's this number synced up to my son and Aleister Crowley. Also, if you go from August 31st this year to the anniversary of the Trump assassination attempt, 7/13/2025, it's also 316 days. So, once again, it just seems important. And remember, the day that my son was born, I was following this big narrative with NASCAR, and I thought a racer would die of some sort. It was all connected to France, and then on that day we got the death of the French racer Antoine Hubert. And it was all synced up to everything that I was talking about. It had to do with capital letters. And then in 2021, my son had woke up in the middle of the night on 3/19. It was the early hours of 3/19/2021, which is the same day that Joe Biden fell up the stairs of Air Force One, which in the previous video I talked about the connection to the stock market with that as well, and his bike crash. But it was on 3/19. My son had woke up, and I was rocking him in the chair, and I turned on a random movie on Netflix that I'd never seen before called Eurovision Song Contest with Will Ferrell. And Will Ferrell was singing a song called Volcano Man in the opening scene of the movie, and he was from Iceland. And then hours later, the big headline story in the news was that there was a volcano eruption in Iceland, right? And 319 is also the day that the Simpsons episode came out with Lisa Simpson wearing the same outfit that Kamala Harris wore on her vice presidential inauguration day, where they said that, the first woman president was after Donald Trump or whatever. This day is super important, It's actually the first day that that Joe Biden met Pope Francis as well. 319. He met him at the inauguration of Pope Francis when he was the vice president at that time. So I'm bringing this up because my son, his name in the Francis Bacon ciphers just so happens to equal 319. So it's interesting I would have that weird synchronicity, but a couple days later, the kid from Talladega Nights who played Will Ferrell's son in the movie, he died. And it was all linked up to this volcano symbolism that was going on. But if you go back to when I first learned about the number 418 and Aleister Crowley, it was last fall when I made this umbrella video about Rambo being kicked off the Gematria effect on the Ides of March episode. And then Zach made this other video where he's trying to make me look like a fool or whatever, I don't even care. I'm done with all of it. But it's interesting that, it was his main topic was the Kennedy curse, right? In relation to Donald Trump and so on. But I also had a synchronicity around this time with my son, and he wanted me to help him on this Nintendo game where Yoshi turned into an umbrella. And it was 319 days before my son's birthday, and I noticed my son equals 319, and I was following this pattern, right? And I'm just trying to lose my train of thought. But when I saw the 319, I had been following a whole bunch of stuff, and I remembered on this video that I made where Rambo got kicked off the Gematria effect, Zenith of the Alpha pointed out to me how the number 418 really stood out to him because Rambo's first call to the Gematria effect was on 418, which is also Zach's dad's birthday, and it's also the day of the San Francisco earthquake, and Zach was in San Francisco on 418 last year, I believe. Not saying he did it all on purpose, I'm just pointing out facts and things that are going on. But Zenith was telling me how he noticed the importance of Zach's radio show and the number 418, because Zach always talked about the book of the law with Aleister Crowley, and it had the number 418 on it, on a lot of the covers anyway. And a big thing that Zach did years ago was he did predict the death of Prince, right? He said to watch Prince, better watch his ass, and so on. And it really amplified the Gematria community and so on. And Zenith pointed out that, Zach's first ever TFR episode was a span of 93 days after Prince's birthday, and his first ever TFR episode was a span of 4 months and 18 days after Prince's death. So 418 and 93, these numbers on the cover of the Book of the Law. And when I noticed my son Aleister had that connection to 319, I thought that was interesting because Prince has the song called 319, and Prince died 319 days after his birthday. And there's so much to re-explain with all this, but a lot of what Zach was talking about in this video was my salsa synchronicity, and he was making it ridiculous. And there was a real narrative that I was following with why that was important that was completely dismissed, but it had to do with the Cliff theme that I was following, and that's why Cliff Robinson had died, and there was that's why there was a bunch of Cliff stories in the news right before Cliff Robinson had died, and that salsa was called Cliffy's Salsa. But back in October, I noticed that I also had a blog post in May of 2023, before all this went down, where I was talking about the Foo Fighters and this synchronicity with that Cliff theme, that same one. And it led me to watch the movie Studio 666, and in Studio 666, they have this symbol here, right? And on some of the covers of the Book of the Law, it has that same symbol. So I was like, huh, that's pretty interesting how it's, once again, related to Aleister Crowley. And Zach's radio show then, so his very first ever episode was on September 7th. And out of nowhere, the TFR website just kind of started going down. And the very last episode of his to go on to the actual website was on January 24th. And that episode just so happened to be 4 months and 18 days after his first episode to air on the website. So his first episode date to the last episode date was 4 months and 18 days. Remember, Rambo's first call was on 4/18, and January 24th is this big number I've talked about with Rambo. His name even equals 124. His first blog post on Zach's blog, Rambo's Corner, is on 124. His first episode of the Gematria Effect was 1 month and 24 days before his birthday. But Zach then later started a podcast called Wake the Fuck Up Radio, and that was 4 months and 18 days before his birthday. Wake the Fuck Up Radio equals 418. And he started that a span of 93 days after Aleister Crowley's death day. 93 and 418, yet again. So, you know, once again, not saying he did on purpose, just saying there was a connection, you know. He mentioned how he had his first ever sponsor back then, Monero Coffee. Monero Coffee equaled 418, right? A whole bunch of stuff with the same narrative. I was also talking about the big rose theme with it was the 418th anniversary of the gunpowder plot back in last November. And there's so much to this. Aleister Crowley's wife was named Rose. Believe it or not, my son Aleister, if he was a girl, we're going to name him Rosie. But Charles Manson is important to his interview with Charlie Rose. Marilyn Manson has a video where he has the rose coming out of his brain or whatever. The Kentucky Derby is the run for the roses. Aleister Crowley was born the same year that the first ever Kentucky Derby was held. And this year, oddly enough, the Kentucky Derby was won by Mystic Dan. And it was all synced up to my book, The Synchro Mystic, and my name is Dan. I'm not going to go into that, but, you know, there's something very interesting about what's going on here. The previous year, the winner of the horse race in 2023, the Kentucky Derby, was Mage, which is short for magician. And if you look at the birthday of that horse, it was 4/18. So once again, there is a connection to the Kentucky Derby and Aleister Crowley and a big theme with roses. But I guess I'm trying to sum it up here. I have to go to a band gig pretty soon. I never have enough time to make these videos. But it's funny because I was actually blogging about Prince and this connection to Zach back in July here. I was talking about The Simpsons and whatever, but I mentioned how there's something important to Prince and 319 and how it's linked up to Zach and whatever. And then a few days later, Zach had a couple blog posts about Prince and Purple Rain turning 40 years old. And what's so interesting is that Purple Rain actually came out 316 days before Prince's birthday. Or it was the film Purple Rain, released 316 days before Prince's birthday. A whole bunch of stuff here. And of course, Prince is from Minnesota, where Super Bowl 52 was held, right? Which, another big old thing there. There's something important to how that all is linked up. Even Tim Walz, he became the governor of Minnesota 337 days after Super Bowl 52. Once again, 337th composite is 418. And his birthday is a span of 4 months and 18 days after Joe Biden's birthday. But if you look at my very first post about the Donald Trump assassination attempt, I was talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer and how I was watching for the date July 30th because possibly there was something going on with that date because that's the day Buffy came out. And then on July 31st, Zach ended up making a TFR episode. You know, a TFR episode. First time since February 28th, he made a TFR episode. And it just so happened to be 316 days before Rambo's birthday, you know? It's just some crazy stuff. Another connection to the numbers 418 was just a few days before this, Zach had made a video and he titled it The Amish Paradise. And he was having synchronicity with Amish, and he made this video called The Amish Paradise on July 29th. And, you know, this is interesting because if you go back and watch my umbrella videos, and I haven't talked a whole lot about the umbrella stuff because, once again, a lot of times it gets deleted every time I really bring this up. So I don't want to go too in depth with it. I'll leave some links in the description that you can watch. But one of the videos that kept getting deleted and I get a strike for, and I ended up putting it on BitChute, it just so happens to have Coolio and Weird Al in the title, you know. And I'm talking about Coolio and Weird Al and the connection to the umbrella symbolism in this video that always, it got deleted multiple times. So right away that just stands out, you know. And there's more to this, but he called it the Amish Paradise, even though his synchronicity wasn't necessarily with the song Amish Paradise, but that's what he titled it. And when you look at the song Amish Paradise by Weird Al, it came out on March 12th, 1996. And that just happened to be 4 months and 18 days after Weird Al's birthday, 4/18. But it gets even better because the synchronicity with Amish that Zach was having, and then he made that video called The Amish Paradise, it just so happened to be 4 months and 18 days after the song Amish Paradise came out. And March 12th is also an interesting date because that's the day that Zach and his sweet lady found out that she was pregnant. And remember, this is the 72nd day of the year this year. And think how I started this video off talking about how both my sons were born in connection to the number 72. And Zach was going to name his kid Ace. Well, it ain't got to pull up here, but I just pulled up a regular one here, but in the base ciphers here, Ace equals 72. That was what they originally wanted to name the kid because they thought it was going to be a boy. And they found out that she was pregnant on the 72nd day of the year. And then later, they found out that it's actually going to be a girl. And he was talking about the name Ruby, if that's the right spelling. But it's interesting that in the composite ciphers with the typical spelling of the name Ruby, it equals 72. And remember, with the umbrella symbolism, all that, once again, it went back to the end of 2016 with the umbrella man threatening Zach. And Zach had also had that website that started called All for Truth, the umbrella logo. Then my uncle died and a bunch of things, right? But when my uncle died, the big thing with the angel Gabriel and such was because of the number 1012. And I read Daniel 10:12, where the angel Gabriel tells Daniel he's coming to help him with his understanding, right? And then I pointed out this is also Aleister Crowley's birthday, right? So there was something connected to all of that narrative. And way back then I was talking about how the angel Gabriel only comes to Daniel, Zechariah, and Mary in the Bible. And remember, the Umbrella Man made a video connected to exactly what I was talking about, and I was talking about how we'd possibly see a truth seeker named Mary, and then the lady Mary Toffelmeyer called into Zach's radio show a few days later, and she was talking about how the Umbrella Man wanted to hurt her pet pig, and my daughter had just went to bed, and she told me to watch her stuffed animal pet pigs, and a whole bunch of stuff. So, all I'm saying is this is interesting. This umbrella symbolism goes back to the number 1012, that's synced up to Aleister Crowley, but is also synced up to the birth of my children, and they were both born by the number 72. And then Zach finds out he's going to be having a kid on the 72nd day of the year. They originally want to name it Ace, that equals 72, and now they're talking about naming it Ruby because it's a girl. And Ruby in the composite ciphers equals 72, and these composite ciphers are important because we learned about Aleister Crowley, you know, they're in connection to Aleister Crowley. So there is definitely something going on with how all of this is interrelated, you know? And what's even funnier is on this same day that Zach made that video, I got a text message asking if I could DJ on August 31st at the bar. August 31st, right? Which was my son Aleister's birthday. And what's so interesting about August 30th, or the people who asked me were Joel Heffernan and his wife Kristen Heffernan. And it sticks out because my son, his middle name, my son Aleister, his middle name is Addie, which sounds like a girl's name, right? His middle name's Addie, but the reason that we named him this was because of this old guy named Pat Heffernan, who used to come into the gas station that I work at, and he used to be really good friends with my grandpa Murphy, who I never met, who was my Uncle Barney's father. But my grandpa Murphy, his birthday just so happened to be 10/12 of all days. And then his best friend, Pat Heffernan, used to come into the gas station where I work, and he'd always tell me this story about some other relative that I had. It was on my dad's side named Addie MG. Apparently, it was some old guy who used to ring the church bell at work or at the church, like when this guy was a kid. And this guy is like 90 some years old, right? So it was just such an odd thing. He'd always bring this up. He always asked me like if I knew this guy, and I'm like, the guy is probably 150 years old right now if he was still alive. I was like, there's no way I would know this guy, but this guy would always bring this story up. So I was like, we should name our Aleister's middle name Addie. And then I was like, Aleister Addie, that sounds like a rock star name, kind of, So, and then I came home and asked Jasmine, and Jasmine was like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, actually. So that's how Aleister got his middle name, was because of this guy, Pat Heffernan, whose name equals 418. And his brother was Ed Heffernan, and Ed, I swear he knows about this knowledge, or he died years back, but I swear that guy remembered every single person in town's birthday. And I always thought that was the weirdest thing growing up, that he knew everyone's birthday. There was a local channel on TV, and every year on my birthday, he'd write Happy Birthday Deb, because that's my initials, Daniel Edward Barrett. Terrible for whatever. I don't know what my parents were thinking when they did that, but that guy always wrote Happy Birthday Deb on this access channel that was only local to my small town, and he knew everyone's birthdays. I swear that guy knew about this knowledge. I don't know. And I wish he was still alive so I could ask him about it. But moral of the story is the reason that Aleister got his middle name Addie was because of a guy named Pat Heffernan that equals 418. And then on the same day that Zach had this Amish paradise synchronicity, right? I got asked to DJ a wedding on Aleister's birthday, and it just so happened to be the great nephew of the guy who Aleister got his middle name from. I hope that makes sense. But the kid who asked me to DJ or whatever, his birthday is 5/16. And the 418th composite just so happens to be 516. And 5/16 just so happens to be 3 months and 16 days before August 31st. And even more interesting is that his wife, her name, Kristen Heffernan, just so happens to equal 418 in the composite ciphers and also 516 in the capital letter ciphers. So it couldn't be more perfect that these people would ask me that. But what's even weirder is the fact that when August 31st came, and I started this video on August 30th, and I never had time to finish it because I had to go to a band gig. Then, like I said, the very next day I had to work all day at the gas station, and then I went straight to the bar because I was supposed to DJ for this. It was a diaper keg is what I was DJing for, or a gender reveal party, and they bought like a keg, and then people can pay in diapers. They do these diaper keg things. But when the date came around, August 31st, I went to the bar after I got off work, and they decided that I wasn't going to DJ because they had ended up they started the party at like 10 in the morning because they were watching the Iowa Hawkeyes or whatever. They wanted to watch the Iowa Hawkeyes play. So they started really early, and by the time I got there at like 5:30ish, everybody was already drunk and ready to go home. And then the next day, Dow City, the town, was having like a Dow City day. So they were having a big old fun day, and everyone was going to go to bed early so they could get up and party again the next day. So, and they kind of told me this beforehand anyway, like that possibly they weren't going to have me DJ, but if not, they wanted me to come up and drink a couple beers before they left and just hang out. And I was like, well, that's fine. It's not a big deal. I wasn't doing anything anyway, really. So anyway, I go up there and I find out I'm not DJing, and I end up drinking a couple beers, and I'm sitting with these old people, and whatever, they just kept buying me beers. It's like, oh my God, dude, I can't say no. And like, I bet I drank 10 Budweisers or some crap, you know? These old people were sitting there until about 7:30, 8 o'clock, like just kept buying me beer after beer after beer after beer. And I just find it funny because in that there was this old guy named Marv. I don't even know what his name is, but he kept talking about Donald Trump and Kamala Harris over and over, and he wouldn't shut up about it. And at some point, it ended up just being me and him, and he kept telling me about if Kamala becomes president, I'm taking all my money out of my stocks and everything else. So I just thought that was really funny. Nothing really, really super big happened on August 31st, but it's really weird that I would run into a guy talking about how he's going to take all of his money out of his stocks and everything else if Kamala becomes the president. And I'm talking about this big theme with the stock market and whatever else. And that was one thing that happened on August 31st. I had also had a synchronicity with the song Champagne Supernova a few days before that. And it was actually 3 months and 16 days after the song Champagne Supernova came out. Because I had a band gig on September 1st in Des Moines, and I was also DJing at that Dow City Fun Day the very next day. That's why it didn't matter too much if I didn't DJ the night before, because I was like, I'm going to be back here tomorrow anyway. But basically, I DJed during the day, and then at 4 o'clock, I packed all my stuff up, and I left, and I went to Des Moines because we had a band gig for a wedding on that Sunday night, September 1st. And considering it was a wedding, and our band doesn't really play a whole lot of really slow songs. You know, we do a huge mix, but we don't really have any like slow dancing songs. And I was like, oh, for a wedding, maybe we want to have some slow dancing songs. And I was just trying to think of like old songs that we've done at weddings in the past. And probably, I don't know what day it was. It was 3 months and 16 days after Champagne Supernova released. It was like maybe the Wednesday or the Thursday before we had that band gig. I was thinking about slow songs at work, and I was like, oh, we've done the song Champagne Supernova at a wedding before. That's sort of slow, whatever. And then we also did Wonderful Tonight. A lot of times if my singer knows how to play a song, which he knows like millions, I feel like, he'll just tell me how it goes, and then I will just fake our way through it, you know? But I was like, Champagne Supernova. I know we played that at a wedding, and I was thinking about the song Champagne Supernova. And then I came back out of like the cooler at work, and the song Champagne Supernova was playing. And I was like, well, that's craziness. And then we had a band gig on that Friday, August 30th, that I was talking about when I started making this video. And it was for a pool party in Omaha. And at the end of the night, some guy requested the song Champagne Supernova. And I was like, no way. Somebody requested Champagne Supernova at this party. That's just the weirdest. I don't know. It just seems so crazy that that specific song would get requested. It never gets requested. So we played Champagne Supernova on Friday, August 30th. And then the next day, there was a headline story in CNN about the song Champagne Supernova. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Well, what the heck? There was this story on August 31st. This was a headline story that CNN gave me. Oasis fans upset by high prices and long delays on Ticketmaster site. So I just thought it was funny. There was a headline story on August 31st on CNN about the band Oasis, who sings Champagne Supernova. And the night before, my band had played the song Champagne Supernova, which was just after I was thinking about the song, and then the song was playing on the radio at work, you know? So there's more to this. I'm not going to go into it, but like I said, it was definitely a personal synchronicity that happened on August 31st. It wasn't anything real big, but there's a big narrative that's number 292 that I haven't figured out yet. But this song was actually the final single that was released by the label Helter Skelter, right? And think about that with Charles Manson and the connection to 316. And but yeah, there's something going on with this number 292. And I'm trying to figure it out. It's connected to my friend giving me that Tua jersey, and then Tua just got a concussion last night, all linked up to Damar Hamlin. And remember, my Uncle Barney had gave me that Dan Marino jersey just before all the umbrella symbolism and whatever. And my friend who gave me that jersey, his name equals 292 in the reverse and frontwards of the composite cipher. But my friend Sturgill, his birthday is November 20th as well, Joe Biden's birthday. And remember when Joe Biden fell going up the stairs at Air Force One, that same day I fell down the stairs at Sturgill's apartment and broke my glasses. And I had to get new glasses for the first time in like 15 years because somebody was really hammered and they fell behind me and knocked me over. And we both fell down the stairs. And, the same day that Joe Biden fell on the stairs, the 319 date. And that sticks out too because in these composite ciphers, my name equals 319, which is this number I've talked about with my son related to volcano symbolism, and it's all linked up to Kamala and the Simpsons episode and all kinds of stuff. So, but in the mix of all this, so on September 1st, right, I had a band gig in Des Moines, and we didn't want to drive 2 hours home after this band gig, so we ended up getting a hotel. And my friend Pat, he's the one who ended up getting this hotel, and he got us a hotel at the Hyatt Place in West Des Moines. And we just so happened to stay at room 337, right? The 337th composite is 418. I was like, what are the odds of that? And the hotel Hyatt Place also equals 316. Also 666 in the Sumerian cipher. And, if you read out 666, I don't think I pointed this out yet, 666, it equals 418. Just think about that. 93 equals 418. All to Aleister Crowley, who's the great beast, 666, right? So what are the odds? 666 even equals 418. But something interesting that happened on this day here. So I stay at this hotel, and earlier in the day, Zach had made these 2 videos about the death of Mark Passio's father and the death of Joseph Aquaviva's father. And right away that stood out to me because remember the video where we learned about the composite numbers? That was in a video where Zach was talking about Joseph Aquaviva as well. So I was like, man, there's got to be some connection to this. And I'll show in a second, but a few days later, 4 months and 18 days after the date 418, which is Zach's father's birthday. I'll just show it really quick and I'll come back to this, but 4 months and 18 days after the date 418, which is Zach's father's birthday, look at the 2 headline stories here. A story about a father, and then a story about the Appalachie shooter's father, right? So father and father. 2 headline stories about fathers 4 months and 18 days after Zach's father's birthday. And his father's birthday's on 418, and this is just after Zach makes the video about the 2 fathers of people dying, right? It's like, that's craziness, you know what I mean? And anyway, so I DJ'd in Dow City, and I was listening to these videos kind of on my way, and I stopped at the gas station, and when I was waiting in line at the gas station, there was a guy wearing a jersey that had the number 58 on it, and it said Pops. And I was like, that's hilarious. I'm watching these 2 videos about fathers dying, and then now this guy's wearing a jersey that says Pops, and I was like, that's what some people call their father, right? Pops. And then I was reading Mark Passio's father's obituary, and it goes on to say, affectionately known affectionately as Pops. I was like, and he died on May 8th, 5/8, right? So after I'm watching this video, I go into the gas station, and there's a guy in front of me wearing a jersey with the number 58 on it, and it says Pops. And then I look up this guy's obituary who died on 5/8, and they tell us that he was referred to as Pops. It's like, you can't even make this up, But there's all kinds of connections here. I'm not going to go into all of these, but it's exactly connected to what I'm talking about, Like Mark Passio's father, he was born on May 29th. That's 418 days before Zach's birthday, right? That's also JFK's birthday. So 418 days before Zach's birthday was Mark Passio's father's birthday. And Joseph Aquaviva's father, he was born on February 4th, which was the day of Super Bowl 52. Like, you know what I mean? And Joseph's full name equals 337, which is the 418th composite. You know, what are the odds? One of the fathers is born on the day of Super Bowl 52. One of them's connected to Zach with the number 418. Zach's father's born on 418. We get the story about two fathers headlining CNN 4 months and 18 days after the date 418. Not to mention, I've been talking about this theme with a dream that I had of my father dying right after Super Bowl 52 all year long. You know what I mean? Like, I have like probably 100 blog posts on this theme with this dream that I had and from in 2018, and the dream was about my father dying, and my uncle Clancy, who died right after Super Bowl 52, was at my dad's funeral, and he was alive and healthy and all this. And so I was like, $1 billion is connected to my dad somehow. And a big thing that Zach was pointing out was that Joseph Aquaviva's favorite number is 222. And he connected it to the, whatever the hell, the superior general of the Jesuits, because, you know, we got to connect everything to the Jesuits and so on and whatever else, but superior general equals 222. He also posted a link to the death of Mark Passio's wife, and Mark Passio's wife died on 222. If you read out Joseph Aquaviva, his name equals 222 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. And Mark Passio and Joseph Aquaviva's birthdays are 2 months and 22 days apart, depending on what you use. I don't know for sure what Mark Passio's birthday is, because Zach has it 2 different birthdays in his 2 different posts. You know, but if it is August 12th, that means their birthdays are 2 months and 22 days apart even. And then Joseph Aquaviva, 222, right? Mark Passio's wife died on 222. Zach's connected to Superior General. That equals 222. Think about the Superior General, whose birthday is November 12th, which is typically the 316th day of the year. But what's interesting, he made these videos 222 days before my dad's birthday. 222. And it was also 3 months and 16 days before Pope Francis's birthday. Pope Francis, father, priest, father, you know. But in relation to this being 222 days before my dad's birthday, it's interesting because the whole dream theme that I'm talking about, it goes clear back to this dream that I had when I was in high school. I had a dream that my friend Crystal's father died in a car wreck. And my friend Crystal's father ended up dying in a car wreck the very next day. And the only person I ever told was my mom. I said, it's crazy. I had a dream last night that her dad died, and then her dad did die in a car wreck. Like the very next day. Or they wrecked a truck, I believe it was. But it was like, years later, I found out that the mom, my friend Crystal's mom, is a psychic. And I was like, that's craziness, right? But my friend Crystal's mom, her birthday is 222. And her husband ended up dying 4 months and 18 days after her birthday. Right? So I had this dream about a psychic's husband dying. He dies the next day, 4 months and 18 days after her birthday. Her birthday's on 222. And her name when her husband died in the satanic cipher just so happens to equal 418 in the satanic cipher, you know? Another big thing I talked about was Sylvia Brown, right? Sylvia Brown, the psychic who was on Montel. Used to watch that all the time. But Sylvia Brown, she died 4 months and 18 days after Montel's birthday, right? 418. So there's a psychic theme that goes along with this, dream theme, and it all connects to the number 418, and it also connects to the number 222. And then Zach makes this video 222 days before my father's birthday about these 2 fathers dying, and then Zach's father's birthday's on 418. I mean, there's something ridiculous going on here. You know what I mean? And this is what I've been trying to tell people for years. It's like, it isn't just all the Jesuits and whatever else. I mean, unless they're running a bunch of magic spells on us and making all these synchronicities and everything else happen. None of it makes any sense. And then to further connect it back to the Donald Trump assassination, this is where it gets even more wild, is when I first found out of the Donald Trump assassination attempt or whatever. Let me see here. I don't know where I put it. It's right here. Look at this. The very first post I have about Donald Trump and the assassination attempt, I am talking about another crazy thing is that I found out Trump was shot on a car ride to my brother's house yesterday. My kid was playing on my phone, but my mom randomly showed me a post on Facebook that Trump was shot. The reason it's so important, though, is that it happened at the exact spot where the guy from the Dream Theme died in a car crash. So this guy that I dreamt about dying, the psychic's husband, I found out that Donald Trump was shot right at the exact crash site where he died from, right? And right next to the train tracks with an NIN fence post. Maybe it was because of this, but last night I had a dream that my dad died again. In the dream, I was crying on the couch and I was trying to unravel a phone cord. Then a bit later, my mom and dad both came in the living room to see what was wrong. I was confused as I thought my dad died, but there he was standing there with my mom. I then asked them if this was a dream, and then I woke up. Right? So, in my very first blog post about Donald Trump assassination attempt, I'm talking about this dream theme that connects back to my father dying, right? So it's like, what are the odds of this, right? And I find out at the exact spot where this other guy died, right? I know I put a picture of it because I actually stopped and took a picture of this fence right next to where this guy died. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Yeah, July 29th. Even more interesting, the day that I put that up. But right where this guy died, there's this big, if you look way out at the train tracks, there's these posts that look like the Nine Inch Nails logo. And remember I had that dream about my dad 9 days before the FIU bridge collapse. And when I won a bunch of money gambling earlier in the year, it was all about the number 9. And it was 9 days before and all this stuff. I have a whole video on it. But the day that I found out Donald Trump was shot, I was in the car right next to this, right next to where that guy died, that I had a dream about, right? And then it's connected to 418 and 222, and then Zach makes the video about the fathers, and it's connected 222 days before my father's birthday. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, I hope that neither one of our fathers dies this year, but there's definitely something going on, you know what I mean? When I was talking about this in 2018, I was talking about how I thought it was connected to my father's dad, right? And then my dad's father, I thought he was going to die when my dad was 63 years old. And he died a month shy of my dad's birthday on 3/10/2020, right before coronavirus got stupid and whatever. But 310 is that number connected to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And do you see that very first post I had about Donald Trump? It was all connected to 310 and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And, I have had so many synchronicities with this all year. A few days after that blog post, I was looking at the videos of Joseph Aquaviva's dad and whatever, trying to figure out this riddle. And at the same time, I was listening to a basketball game because I bet on like Angel Reese to get a double-double or something. So I was just listening to it. And there was a girl shooting a free throw, and then they went on to tell us about her father dying. And I was like, what are the odds? I'm looking at Joseph Aquaviva's father's video. And then the girl on the announcers tell us about this girl's father who died. And her father just so happened to be born on June 24th, which is a humongous day I was talking about with this father symbolism in relation to that dream. And it goes on to tell us how they called him Pops as well. Pops, And since it was a Las Vegas team, talked about the Super Bowl 58 being held in Las Vegas on 2/11 and how this happened 211 days after Joseph Aquaviva's father's birthday, and 2 months and 11 days after June 24th, after her father's birthday. And June 24th is 292 days before my father's birthday, once again. And her father's name equaled 292. And once again, this brings it all back to that synchronicity with Champagne Supernova on August 31st that I'm talking about with 292 that I don't completely understand. But there's something with this number 292, that's, I just don't completely understand it. There's something interesting with my dad's connected to the volcano symbolism as well. And it's all related to Seattle, which is interesting in relation to Zach and so on too. But on 6/24 this year, my uncle from Seattle had randomly showed up. He just came back from Seattle, never told anybody, and he showed up. And he came back to visit for like a week. And that was on the date 6/24. And I just had this synchronicity with Caitlin Clark and Aleister Crowley. And I noticed that the fever could become 7 and 11. And that was a big number with Aleister Crowley that I was following. And then I had a bunch of synchronicity with Seattle and Caitlin Clark and volcano symbolism. And so it's interesting, this girl's even named Clark, Alicia Clark. But, once again, that was even connected to Aleister Crowley. But because of that, I bet on the Seattle Storm to win the WNBA Finals. I just had a small bet or whatever, but yeah, right here, I even talked about it. I was talking about the Indiana Fever falling to 7 and 11, and it was synced up to Aleister Crowley and this volcano theme and Mount Rainier. And the very next day, my uncle from Seattle just randomly comes into town. I really need to end the video here, but I mean, there's so many other things I could talk about and I want to talk about, but I'm getting jumbled, but I'm still watching this date 10/6. That's the biggest date that I've been following all year. It's synced up to my son Aleister with the NASCAR symbolism. It's synced up to the volcano symbolism. It's synced up to Queen Elizabeth, who died 4 months and 18 days after her birthday. There's something, it just seems this is the date. I don't know, it's synced with the gambling symbolism. It's 35 days before my birthday, like the word volcano equals 35, and 10/6. It's also synced up to Prince, right? Because a long time ago, Zach used to always talk about Prince and prophecy equals 106. And think about how Prince is connected to Zach with 418 and the TFR radio shows. So, I mean, you could just come to my blog and search like dream or train dream or father. You're going to find out all these things with the dream theme are related to a train theme and how it's all related back to my father. And I had synchronicity with the movie Dream a Little Dream. And I was getting ready to watch the supernatural episode called Dream a Little Dream of Me. And it's just, I was at work. I think it was the next day, or maybe it was on 9/5. Hold on. What day did I post that? I'm not sure what day it was, but it must have been 9/4. But I was at work, and all of a sudden everybody ran outside, and I was like, what is going on? Apparently this like special steam train was coming through town, and they all wanted to get videos of it. I had no idea about this, but Jay Leno ended up being on that train. And he stopped in Denison, Iowa, and once again, it's all connected to the same dream theme that is connected to my father. And that's why it was important that that dream that I had about the psychic's father dying was right next to the railroad tracks with the 9-inch nails logo. So, once again, I'm going to end the video, but, James Earl Jones died, the guy from Field of Dreams. And if you go back to 2021, after I released my book, I was talking all about the theme with dreams and how it connected up to Kanye West, and the guy from the Everly Brothers had just died. They have the song called Dreams, 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 whatever. And I was talking about the date 10-6 and that too as well. So we will see, but have a good one. Peace.